AJ gets to carry all the.
Well,
She are you still living in Montana, or out west?
I am
Yeah.
absolutely. I
Um,
took too long to
Dan,
get here. I'm not leaving.
Dan only
what's
does
that,
it for
AJ?
people like you. Dan only does this for people like you, Jeff. He does it for first
Oh man,
responders.
that's even.
Yeah,
This is even cooler for
yeah,
me to be able to sit in this seat
yeah,
tonight. I was really excited to learn more about you. I've been reading about it, and like you see, AJ
mhm,
and I had talked briefly, and briefly, we spent probably 30 minutes, 45 minutes shooting the breeze about y'all's connection. And
mhm.
Dan, I don't mind. Like I had made this, I thought y'all were like couple, and she's like, no, we're not couple. So it was even. I wanted to tell you that, like, I had my foot in my mouth moment with AJ, like a lot of us professional public safety guys do. I made the wrong call, Dan. I made the wrong call.
Happens.
Yeah, man.
Mhm.
Folks, we're live tonight with AJ Otjen. She's a 2023 Library of Congress award-winning author, and Dan Steffensen, who is a Montana firefighter. And together, um, they make an amazing team to offer a gripping firsthand account of survival. And we get to hear from Dan tonight, who's going to be with us. And I told him as we were talking, kind of in what I call our virtual green room, that I have no questions. And I just want to let this story evolve. You've got two public safety, me former, I don't know if you're still current, but our backgrounds are deeply rooted in public safety, public service. And you, Dan, worked in a profession, and I told you, like, you're a wildland firefighter. And I do not envy you all, the effort that you all put in, and that uncertainty that I watch unfold in those fire scenes just is something that I was always like, yeah, I don't know that that's for me. So I'm excited to learn more about you, that profession, your firsthand account of how. Because I also kind of got the vibe that, like, that was your passion, and it still is, and you enjoyed that, digging those fire lines, like we said earlier. And I wanna learn more about where that passion comes from, man. So I'm really excited to meet both of you tonight.
Glad to be here. Very glad to be here.
You absolutely fit that guest of the Second Chance podcast. And when it comes into those, this is the ultimate second chance. So if you like, just for the sake, walk us through your path of how you kind of started in public safety at 15, Dan. At a very young age, I started I was an EMT before I did. I tell everyone, Dan, I graduated, and I call myself a high school graduate. And that's kind of equivalent to a 12th grade education. I feel like I got about a 10th grade. They let me skate on the rest because EMS and all that stuff came easy to me. I could pass a first aid or an EMT class and struggle in math and English. And but I found that was my easy, the information. I understood it. It was common sense to me, and I was able to excel in that field. So I started in a very age. But how about yourself? How did you get started in the fire service?
I started in the fire service at age 58.
Really?
I moved to a small town, and that department is a volunteer department. I wanted to be a firefighter since I was 6. I had an uncle who was a fire chief in a small town in Idaho, and I idolized that guy. And every time we visited, he'd let me ride the trucks, let me slide the pole. And I think the first slide down the pole, I said, yeah, I want to do this for the rest of my life. But I applied to a couple of departments in the 70s. It was a different time. I was not
Yeah.
accepted. You understand some of that.
Yep.
But so I went about my life, and I became involved in business, did a lot of things, and essentially retired at 56. And somebody asked me, why don't you join the fire department here in Red Lodge? And I said, heck yeah. Age was not an issue to me, and I don't think it was an issue to them. So off I went, and I loved it. Loved it.
So tell me real quick, let's walk through that business side because that's a lot of what we talk about as well. Well, your life took you into business before the fire service, but what kind of business did you work in?
I banged around for a bunch of years, and finally, at about 23 or 4, I started out washing cars for a car rental company in Phoenix, and hated it. But I had some talent in that regard. Ended up as a rental agent, a manager, uh, and at a point, I bought my own franchise in Cincinnati, Ohio. Ran that for a bunch of years, and an offer came along I could not refuse, and I left. And I wasn't rich by any stretch of the imagination, but I had enough go to hell money.
Yeah.
Somebody said, "What do you want to grow up and be?" I said, "I want to be a fly fishing guide right now." And I drove to Montana or drove to Idaho and actually became a fly fishing guide for 6 years. Did that for a bunch of years. A friend of mine asked me to come back and help me with a business he was running. I did that, and finally, at 56, I said enough. I want to be a rancher. Found out very quickly I didn't want to do that either, and retired.
You should go back to the
That's
very beginning when
always
he was first. He was a skydiver. You have to understand the mentality of this man. He's always been an adventurer and an outdoorsman and a
that's what I was gonna
sort of
say.
a
He is the uncertainty,
yes.
he thrives in
Yeah,
uncertainty.
yeah.
Yes, he
He's
does.
always been a guy who's
Tell me
taken risks. So go ahead.
what is the what is your skydiving background, Dan?
Mhm.
It was all sport jumping, um, and then back in Ohio, again, different times, the '70s. We didn't do that tandem stuff. They just
Right.
strapped you out, and eventually you figured it out. I ended up probably with about 1,100 and some jumps. Uh, Made a living at it for a few years, and that was great. They paid way too much back then. Um, and then I was in a couple of plane crashes in a pretty short period of time, and it didn't have the same feeling as it did before that.
I could see that. I could see that.
Mhm.
Stealing a little bit of your adventurous away there. It- but I do see that in a lot of my firefighter friends, to where it's adventure and there's um, a lot of love for the outdoors, being outside, um, and then kind of like you said, a little bit of thrill seeking as well. I think we all have that in the public safety. I think I remember my um, first junior squad application. I put they ask you always like give 3 reasons why you want to join, and I put thrill of adventure was one of mine.
And that,
Uh, but was there? So I have a couple friends, and you remind me of my friend Tom, particularly who worked with. He was a stockbroker. He worked, and then I think maybe he was a 9/11 moment guy. Maybe I'm wrong. I have to ask him. I'll share this episode with him and tell him about the similarities. But he came out of he kind of came out of corporate world and entered into public safety. He was like, this is something I've always wanted to do, and has worked his way basically into almost ready to retire from being a paid firefighter now, firefighter paramedic. So I think when you look at that, folks, and to tell our audiences, that's not unheard of for someone to come into a community and start working or retire and pick up volunteering. I live in grew up in a lake, and so we would have retirees that staff fireboats and dive teams and things that were unique. So what you're talking about is um, it's commonly uncommon as it is. I guess you could say I see it, and you probably do too. Over here, a lot of folks are like, "What the heck? You just retired from all this other stuff, and you could go and not have to worry about danger, and you walk right back into it." Where does that come from, Dan? Is that your folks that was around you growing up, or
no, I was always kind of a strange kid, and grew up into a strange man. But I am
Yes, it's
convinced. and still to this point, uh, we gain character by risk.
Mm.
So I wanted all the risk I could get a hold of, manageable risk. The car rental business was death by spreadsheet, um, and I did it. I had some success, but always wanted to be a firefighter. Always wanted to. Helping people is part of that, but it helped me more than I helped them at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I think all of us find that worth and the value in that help. Um, and you lose. I don't know if it happened to you or not where you came in, but like sometimes we get caught up in the politics of fire service or EMS or the police department. And in my department, sometimes I would say we set window to window talking too long, so negativity can kind of surround some of what. But I had a friend of mine, Tommy from an adjacent county that I worked with, and one day we was kind of in this heated moment and of where he was a captain at where he was, and I was a task force guy, so I kind of got to come and go. And I remember him; he was mentoring one of his young guys, and he hung the phone up and he come over and he sounds like everything okay, and he's like, just working with this young guy, and he goes, he lost his way too quick. And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, folks, when you start getting mad at police work or public safety, he says you forgot why you got into the job. And you got into the job to help people. And there's this moment where we as professionals get caught up in our own stuff. I get caught up in your stuff. You got promoted. I didn't get promoted. You live closer, so you get to be you get to ride in the jump seat, and I don't get to do that, right? So there's we have these little moments, when he told me that, I always repeat that for my public safety folks. It's like, hey, don't forget why you got into this, and then it carries into business and some of the other stuff that I do as well, Dan. Um, and then when you look at your department, you're in a volunteer department in Montana. Is that right, Montana?
Correct. Yep.
Yep, small town. And you guys are the fire service for your area. Is that right? Main department for your town.
We are it for a pretty good size of a pretty good size county, actually.
Yeah. And solo department, like what's a typical day at the firehouse? Are we running car fires? We working the interstate? We doing extrication? What is kind of that looking like outside of your woodland stuff?
We were a full service department, for lack of a
Yeah.
better word. We did structure fires. We
Yep.
did education. We did not have an interstate, um, although we did help another city that did a couple of times. But interstates are terrifying, as are two lane. But
Yeah.
extrication, lots of EMT stuff. I was not an EMT, but I would drive the ambulance because sometimes that was a challenge. And I'm not smart enough to be an EMT and figured that out very quickly. So we did it all. And I was talking to a battalion chief the other day about something, and he said, wildland, he says, that terrifies me. He said, I'd rather do structure. I can run away from that.
Yeah.
Uh,
We can burn it
and
down, right? We can pull the trucks up, get the hose out. We can cover the exposures. We can burn it down if we need to, as long as everybody's out of it.
as long
Um,
as it's gone, that job's over.
yeah,
Problem with wild, and I had to give that one some thought because he was right. I couldn't outrun the mine.
yeah. Walk us into that, Dan, and that's just kind of why we're here tonight. Is you had a significant, um, you guys had a significant fire that happened, and then you're one of the responders to that. Um, can you walk us through that day?
Absolutely. That day we were on what we call severity, and my department has um, a really aggressive wildland department. Once you're part of that group, for lack of a better word, you're I was qualified for fires anywhere in the country,
Yeah,
Canada, go anywhere. Um, and I was rated finally as an engine boss. So I ran an engine with 2 or 3 guys, and
Or girls,
it,
or women.
I'm
Some of your
sorry,
best firefighters or women. You said
or
guys,
women.
but your best firefighter was a woman. So let me
My
pull that. Yeah.
favorites are still young ladies that we had. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
Actually, they asked me to mentor. I asked to mentor one of the young ladies that was coming in. They said, "We don't do that, Dan. We don't give a female firefighter a male mentor." And I said, "Well, too bad. I'm going to do it. So you may as well make it official," because she's a friend of mine.
Yeah.
Uh,
And she ended up
and I had,
becoming one of the best. She's one of the best now. So yeah.
she is one of the darn best. She'll be the chief of that
Mhm.
department. It's I guarantee you.
Mhm.
Um, but we were on severity, and severity is when we get red flag warnings and all that good stuff, and fire danger is extremely high in our area. And the DNRC, Department of Natural Resources and Conservation in Montana, will actually stipend us to be available. So we just sit around all day from 10 in the morning till 10 at night. And sadly, I hope for something to happen.
Yeah.
On this particular day, I actually was in an argument with my chief because I didn't think he was utilizing my talents correctly, um, which is fine. We had differences, but within 10 minutes of walking out of his office, we had a call for a fire in a town just north of us, and off we went. Just the two of us at that time. It took about 25 minutes to get there. We got there, and we started at the bottom of the hill, and we were waiting for the fire to come down the hill so that we could put it out. And while we were standing there waiting, the incident commander asked, there were two of us at the bottom of that hill, two engines, and the incident commander asked one of us to come up on top to the top of the hill and to put out the fire that was up there. And I was ready to go, so we jumped in and went up. We got there, the IC asked us to start to put the fire out along the edge of a fence line and the top of that ridge. So we started doing just that. It was a nothing fire, Jeff. And that's the ones that get us.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you
I,
look at
I,
our,
I know exactly what you're talking about too, because it's like, yeah, well,
come on this door, there's nothing going on. Oops. But flame height was about 2 or 3 feet. There was no wind. There was nothing. We were just putting that fire out. And it was a fire that had actually started the night before, and that particular department thought they had it out. Obviously, we found out later that they didn't. So we spent 10, 15 minutes just putting fire out, and we got to a point where we needed to reset um, where we were going to head to. There were two of us, again, one driving, and myself, I was outside with the hose. And he drives along, I walk along, we put out the fire. It's about, I don't know, 3 feet wide, 3 feet high, nothing. What we didn't know was there was a thunderstorm about 30 miles away to the west. Most of ours come from the west. And we didn't know it. We didn't see it. It was in the weather reports, but we didn't see it partly because of the smoke and partly because there was a ridge that I couldn't see over.
hey Dan, real quick, just so all right, so you got me on a question that I want to clear up for everyone as I'm following along. What year are we talking about, and what month?
July 16th, 2021.
All right, so now we get an idea of. I always try to now I can put myself where I was, but now I got an idea. It's summer. We're dealing with storms. It's hot. I don't know what it's like in Montana, but by July in most places, it's not. It's pretty warm. So you're you're geared back. Maybe you're not in necessarily. I ain't saying you're in shorts and t-shirts, right? But where it's warm, it's hot. You're having to hydrate. You're having to do all the things that sometimes we don't have to do in the winter months. And then 2021 just gives an idea that we're in advanced equipment. So, folks, if you're a non-public safety professional, if you see a fire truck going by your house, or if you see things on TV, we're current, basically, of firefighting time. So I just wanted to clear that up, brother. Sorry to interrupt
No, no interruption. And it was July 16th. It was probably 90 degrees. Um, not and humidity was about 4%. Hence we have fires. Um, I was in full Nomex pants, um, boots, full Nomex shirt, and hard hat and gloves. I had it with full gear on.
you. Yeah.
And I've been on plenty of fires where I got in a hurry and didn't put full gear on. And I'm thankful that I did this time, or we wouldn't be having this discussion. Um,
You were wearing
Thunderstorm.
leather gloves. You were wearing leather
Yep.
gloves. Remember you had worn out your fire gloves.
the gloves, yeah, my gloves were
Yeah.
pretty shot,
Yeah.
but they were better than nothing.
So
Yes,
you're
true.
right. So a storm. So the storm. When we're walking along a truck, I interrupted you right when you were saying there's a storm brewing, and you didn't realize it at the time.
Did not. I was outside the truck, just spraying water, having fun, and I heard something. Sounded like a train, not a big train, but a train. And looked to my left, and we had caught a downflow gust out of that thunderstorm from 30 miles away. Above me, Jeff, there was a helicopter who also he could see the whole storm, but said nothing because he thought we had plenty of time.
He saw
And I
radar. He couldn't see the storm. He only saw it on his
ready.
radar.
Um, and sometime after I got burned over, the Weather Service announced that storm. Takes a while,
Yeah.
but I looked to my left and saw a wall of fire coming at me, probably 50, 60, 70 feet high. So my flame lengths went from 3 foot to 70 foot, and it was cooking. Probably a 60-mile-an-hour draft. I told the guy driving, I said, go to the black being the area that had previously burned. We were in a green area, although the green area is being kind because it was a field that had been in crop rotation program, which is a government subsidy, and he hadn't touched it in 10, 15 years. Nothing.
Yeah.
Um, Scott took off driving, and the flames hit the truck. I was next to the truck, but outside. I didn't feel comfortable trying to stop to get in the truck because then we both get hurt or killed. So I just stayed outside the truck. The flames hit. In that kind of fuel, it burned pretty quick and went right by me. But apparently I was burned and didn't know it or wouldn't admit it.
Hmm.
And we finally got through the fence into the black, and then I started taking account of things.
Yeah.
I
So
had a radio on that I think the flash point on that is 250 degrees, and it was melted.
I was going to ask you, how was your gear? Like, so presentation. So I think, how long are you exposed? Are you in the fire?
Don't know.
Okay.
Not very long.
I was going to say, is it seconds? Like it's just enough, right? They move fast, but you're talking thousands of degrees.
It was
Hmm.
hot.
Yeah.
Maybe 30 seconds, minute. And Scott actually stopped the truck because he couldn't see because the flames were so bad, um, and the smoke. Thankfully, Scott walked away, no injuries whatsoever. Um, but I was burned, but again, I didn't want to admit it. Didn't want to. I mean, I could see my clothes were burned up pretty good, but they called for an ambulance immediately. It took a while for that to show up. They called for an EMT or a paramedic because we were beyond EMT help, and stuck me in an ambulance and took me to Billings. After
Is it?
they get a helicopter, and the helicopters wouldn't fly because of the thunderstorm.
Yeah. Because of the storm. Is your where's your helicopter above when the flames come over? Did they get a first-hand account of?
He
Oh,
did actually. Well,
they
see,
were
the
blown off
helicopter
the bluff. They almost lost it. They were blown off the bluff way down 300 feet below. They lost it. Yeah. It was a
when that
big boom. Yeah.
when that
Yeah.
gust hit the helicopter, almost tipped it over, and he dumped the whole load of water that he had on. Um, and I saw that, and I was pissed because if he'd been 100 feet to the right, I walk away clean.
Yeah.
Uh, but all he did was make a big wet spot.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah.
I've had some buddies that have been in those where they got dumped on. Like the guy, they was getting hot where they were, and their helicopter just dropped the load right on top of them. So yeah, I've been the one wasn't many, but I was close to a dump one time, and it was neat to watch and to watch that kind of unfold. But then, like you said, is once it's done, it's done. There's a time for like it takes them a minute to go reload and get back to where they need to be. Man,
What he's
so
what Dan's not telling you is that the EMT
what was
thought he
going to
was going to
ask me?
die. They thought he was going to die in the ambulance because he was
Yeah,
so badly burned. And they all know each other. Everybody listening on the radio heard the panic in everybody's voice. The EMT got there and just said, load and go. The trip to Billings was 20 minutes, and she was just trying to keep him talking. Thought he was gonna his lung, thought he was gonna lose his was ready to do a tracheotomy
yeah,
all the way to the Billings. Thought he was going to die on the way to Billings. It was a profound experience for her. When he got to the hospital, they thought he was going to die in the hospital. They got him under and got him on a flight to Utah, the burn center. It was a horrific, traumatic experience for everybody. And he was just sitting there going, "Okay, well, I'm not afraid to die. Everybody relax." He was just calm as could be, and they were all freaking out because he was so badly burned. And he said, "No, I can go home. Just tell everybody I'm fine. Oh, where's my wallet?" Because burn victims don't realize how badly they're burned.
oh,
He
man.
had third degree burns over 60% of his body, and they don't feel the pain because their nerves are gone. But and the people I interviewed for this part of the story, they said it was one of the most profound experiences of their life because he was just so calm and didn't think he was hurt, and that he was calming everybody else down. And by the time he woke up in Utah, actually he didn't wake up in Utah because the honor guard met him coming off the plane, and they thought that they were standing over a dead man, and they were covered to shiny shoes. They were going to stand over him until they died and keep guard. That's how serious that whole situation was. And he's talking about it like, oh yeah, I was burned. Yeah,
No,
right.
no, that's right. You teed me up because I was getting ready to ask you, AJ. All right, tell me what
Yeah.
Dan's missed so far. And
Oh, he,
you plugged it in perfectly because this is I can totally understand it, and I know Dan. I've got friends like Dan, and it's just a flesh wound. I'll be all right.
yeah.
And you're like, dude, your arm's missing. Let's go find your eye. It's all right. Don't worry about it. It'll
Right.
take a minute.
Basically,
We
yeah.
got let's get
Oh,
that fire. Let's
he
get
was
that hot spot out over there.
he was mad because they wanted to cut off his boots, and he said, "Hell no! They cost me $500. You're not touching my boots." You know, he was just. It was.
So
I mean, yeah,
What
yeah.
all right, so take I would like to know that part, condition of the truck and condition of your gear. How did that hold up?
Oh, that's a good.
uh,
That's a good point. Yeah.
much destroyed.
Yeah.
Um,
Is the truck
Mhm.
still in service or did you have to pull it out?
Mm.
they had to total that vehicle.
Yeah.
Uh,
Really?
There's pictures of
completely
it in
burned.
the book. Yeah, there's pictures of all of this in the book. Yeah.
And they actually were able to use the pump and some of that stuff, but the truck was shot.
Yeah.
When I actually got through the fence and let them know what was going on. I had to start the pump again to put the truck out because it was burning pretty good. But I could reach
Oh,
through
yeah,
to the.
he was still fighting the fire when they showed up. Yeah.
So AJ, what is we got Dan? We got to this part here. We're burned. We're here. What is the witnesses? What's Scott? What is the helicopter folks? What is kind of their side of what they watched unfold, and maybe a sneak peek
Oh,
inside of the book, or like what is some other things like some of that account of what is going down that they're like probably a little bit of like shock and awe, a little bit of horrified of like he's walking through the fire type
oh yeah.
moment.
Well, pretty much what I just described, because they've never had an accident like this in the Red Lodge
Mm.
fire rescue situation, and I mean they thought he was a dead man, and first of all, understand that he's I think he's coming back. First of all, understand that Dan is beloved. All five. It's a very close knit community. Everybody in Red Lodge sits on the edge of Yellowstone Park, the northern edge of
Wow.
Yellowstone Park. It's surrounded by fuel, forest and grass. Everybody there is either in the fire department or their family or part of the family that is in the fire department. They all know each other, and they're all listening to the radio on the frequency, paying attention to who's where, who's fighting what fire, and they hear on the radio, "Okay, we're burned over, need help," and they're all like, "Huh? Who's burned over?" Right? And so now they're all in a panic, and they don't know at first who's burned over, and then they hear the incident commander getting more and more panicked, "Get that ambulance here now." So they're all like going, "Oh my God, what's wrong?" And then and just to know that somebody's really hurt, and then they all find out it's Dan, and and then they don't, and then they get to the hospital. The chief is sending different chiefs everywhere. One go to the site, one go to the hospital, and then later they realize he's gone. First of all, for Dan to agree to get into the ambulance, then they know it's bad, and then to find out he's been flown to Utah, they're starting to plan the funeral, and they're
Yeah.
sending out emails saying, "Well, with heavy hearts, we have to let everybody know that Dan Steffensen has been severely burned." I mean, the town now is devastated. They're devastated by this time, and now he goes. I understand he's now put into a coma for weeks in Utah. And
Yeah.
Red Lodge has other tragedies going on, and those tragedies turn out badly. So they need him to live. And that's why it was. And when I understood that, that's when I realized how important it was for him to get out of that coma and then survive the horrible ordeal of surviving burns. And it's not. I'm going to let Dan take it over again about what it's like
Yeah.
to come out of coma, and his family is there. His family has come
That's
all over the country for one purpose, for Dan to
yeah.
live and help him get through the ordeal of surviving burns. And I'll say one more thing. He was burned over 60% of his body, but they have to use the other 40% for skin grafts. So it's really
To
100% of his
rebuild.
body. And look at him. You can see this man in front of you. Not bad for 100% of his body having to be come back from such an ordeal.
Yeah.
So, Dan, what's it
Absolutely.
like to overcome burns?
Yeah.
So
I want
I'll give it
to.
back to
So
Dan.
no. So right, before you get there, that you got me, AJ. You teed me up for what I want to know.
Okay.
Dan, at this point in time, you're doing this. Is there a
Mhm.
spouse? Are you girlfriend? What is that
Mhm.
boyfriend? What does that look like? Right? And or you, how close are your relationships, and then how about your family? That's what I wanted to know, AJ. So thank you for because I knew
Yeah.
this is a part where the family starts getting affected by all the things. So what's that relate? What are your relationships like?
My relationship, I was burned in 2021 in July.
Yeah.
In May of 2020, my significant other passed away.
Mm.
So it was just me and the doggo. And when I got to the hospital in Billings, the ER nurse or an ER doctor couldn't have been more amazing. She was calm. She didn't bullshit me. She told me what was going on, and she said, "We're going to intubate you because I'm pretty sure your throat has been burned,
Yeah.
and we're going to knock you out to do that, and you'll wake up in Salt Lake." And that same thunderstorm held me in Billings till 2 in the morning because they couldn't fly. Finally ended up in Salt Lake. AJ talked about the honor guard, and I tear up every time I think of those guys because they met me at the ER and said we'll stay till he passes because they both
At
thought
attention.
there
They're
was no,
standing at attention in full uniform. Yes.
they're
I
amazing.
tear up. Yeah. I
Not
teared
so
up. I had to write about it and I teared up. Yeah. But go ahead.
You tell them they still standing, Dan. It's been a long time, boys. Y'all better. I'm still here.
Yeah.
and they woke me up the next morning from the coma or from the coma just to see if I had any questions. Well, of course I did, but I couldn't talk.
Yeah.
I was on a ventilator, um, but I was able to write. And my first question was, "Is Scott okay?" And he was, and that was great.
Yeah.
My second question was, "How long am I going to be here?" And the doctor said, "I'm guessing 6 to 8 months." And I kind of just said, "It's in the book."
Yes.
And
Choice
shortly
words.
put me back. And then I was in a coma for 26, 25 days. Um, and that's not a good thing.
Mm-mm.
But they did most of the really tough skin grafts during that time period. So I'm thankful I was not awake for that. Having watched other burn survivors go through that nightmare out of not in a coma. Um, when they finally took me out of the coma, and I woke up and looked over, and there was a young man sitting next to my bed, and I just looked at him and said, "Who in the hell are you?" And it turned out to be my 40-year-old son, who I didn't recognize. We hadn't seen each other in quite some time. We hadn't talked to
Yeah.
each other. Um, and that was the beginning of coming back. My daughter was there more than once. Um, my significant other's daughters were both there at other times. And they all live in Cincinnati, and they
Yeah.
kept back and forth.
And your brother. Don't
Uh,
forget Kelly.
and my brother, who turned out to be a pretty key player in this whole thing, as we'll talk about later. But and then most of the grafts were done. They had to rebuild my ears because both my ears had been burned off, and that was one of the last surgeries. I've had three more since I was released, and I was released after 2 months, partly because Jeff, I was a crappy patient, and they'd had enough.
Yeah. You just
Well,
giving them
and
crap the
also
whole
because
time.
Because Red Lodge said that they would take care of him. This town of first responders, they'd rather take care of somebody than worry about them. And because Kelly would come home with him and help with finish off the wound care and everything. And the town said, okay, we'll continue with the wound care. We'll continue with the PT and we'll bring him food and we'll take him to the doctor. The town wanted him home. They needed him to come home. So
Whew,
that's
that's
what
awesome.
happened.
Uh, Dan and I
I'm
had AJ had teed us up as well with a great question before we jump too far ahead about coming home. But what was it like with 60% of your body being burned in third degree burns? What don't relive in any unnecessary hell that you don't want to talk about, but like what was that recovery like and what was that progress like and what was those setbacks and those moments when you realize like, hey, I'm getting better, I'll be back fighting fire soon, right? What is that, what walk us through that? Because listen, man, you know, I have I skated through my time there with nicks and bruises, and um, I have a lot of positives that I come out of that career and that job with. And this is something that is different. And I've never, when I had this opportunity, that's something that was on my mind. Is just, I don't want to skim over your recovery. And so, what was that like? And what was that progress like for you?
Let me just
And
say that one of the chapters is titled "Let Me Die." That's one of the titles.
Yeah.
That's the title of one of the chapters. So
I not when took stock a few days after coming out of the coma, I really did not want to continue. I didn't want to live. I think that went away in a week, 2 weeks. I think a big part of that, Jeff, was I'm a recovering alcoholic, and they were pumping me full of fentanyl, as they should be. But as soon as I became able to make my own decisions, I shut that off,
Yeah.
um, and just made do with Tylenol. Um, and it was mostly okay. Um, there's two issues to this, to an injury of this sort. There's the initial injury and some PTSD from that. And then there's a longer period of PTSD from the recovery. The burn itself didn't bother me. Happened, move on. But the recovery was no darn fun. Um, Between physical therapy and wound care, it you can't you can't bring you can describe it, but you can't relive that, or you can't. I can't explain how bad it hurt.
Yeah.
Um, they take a piece of dead skin and grab it with tweezers and start yanking till it quits. Um, you're naked, laying on a metal table, and they're hosing everything off, and you do that once a day for 60 some days, and that was tougher than the rest of it. Wound care was a nightmare, and you always wonder if it's ever going to end. And and in 2023, my last operation was in May of that year, and that was finally, after 2 years, the end of my skin grafts.
Where's your hope coming from during this time, Dan?
I'm too stupid to quit. That
Determination, big drive, got people waiting for you back home.
I got things to do.
Yeah.
Um, my my daughter-in-law, for lack of a better word, not too long after I was woken up, she was there and she said, "Are you going to go back to fight fires?" And I said, "Oh God, no." And she was very happy to hear that, because none of them were very happy about me doing it in the first place. But I got over that. So I wanted, and probably that came a month into it, that I wanted to get back.
Yeah.
Partly for me, partly for my community, mostly for me.
I understand that. I get that. I was having a conversation here recently about a kid that everybody he had a very we had something significant kind of happen in our town um, where we had a loss of life, and there was a sports game that was planned, and so the people was like, kid need to play the game, and I was like, oh, absolutely. Like when they were telling me about it after fact, I'm like, oh yeah, best place for him's on that field. Best place for us, even if you just do it for a minute, it's just back with that hose in your hand, walking beside that truck. Um, and we're and in a positive way, right? So I totally understand what you're saying there. It's that whole getting falling off the horse, getting back on it type thing, setbacks, all so I can relate to absolutely why that would drive you, and um, the initial the initial pain and all those things, and you're like, I ain't, nope, if I get out of this one, God, I ain't going back no more. And then all of a sudden, it's kind of like this piece of it wasn't the job. It was, I got hurt doing Jason Redmond. He was a Navy SEAL that got shot up pretty bad in Afghanistan. And he says, man, I got injured doing the job I love to do the most. And he says, everybody tried to make it into a negative. And he speaks to that. And he speaks to like, hey, I don't feel sorry for me for living and doing and getting hurt. I got hurt doing exactly what I signed up for and doing exactly what I love to do. And I just got, this is not going to define me, and I'm going to come out of this better than I went into it. And that was the mindset that he took, because he was severely injured, like you were, to the point very life changing, life altering. So I get that, and you're one of the few people alongside of him that I get to hear that firsthand account from. That because I feel it, like I'm like, yeah, I totally understand that.
I loved it. And it's that easy. And it filled a void that I had after Marty passed away. I threw myself into fire. It
Yeah,
gave me a reason to continue, and I didn't want to lose.
I tell this story about one day I got this text that said 4310. And I thought, what the hell is 4310? And it was his pack test time. It was in 2023, 2 years after the burn. It's supposed to take him 3 years to get back to normal. 2 years later, he was taking his pack test, which is 3 miles, 45 minutes, 45 pounds on his back. And you have to do it in 45 minutes. And he texted me 4310. He had passed his pack test, and he still had more. And a week later, he had another skin graft to go. So he shows up in Utah, bleeding like a, what did you say? Bleeding like a
Stuck
stuck
pig.
pig. Yeah, because he had done his pack test and passed it, but had then showed up in Utah bleeding like a stuck pig because but he had qualified to be a firefighter again in after two
toughest
years.
nails.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell
You
you the only negatives I had, and AJ is fully aware of this, but was from some of the officers that I worked for
Mm-hmm.
in my fire department. They were doing everything they could to keep getting back.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
you chopped out
the,
there the last time, Dan. The only setback you had was what now?
I'm sorry.
What was the last part you told me? Connection interrupted. The only last thing you had was what was your setback with your department?
Some of my officers in my department that did not. I don't know. I never did find out what their problem was, nor did I care. It may have been a discussion at some point, and he said, "Why have you not uh, tried to be or asked to be an officer?" And I just looked at him and I said, "Sir, I don't need a title to lead. I'm
Yeah.
just fine." And that kind of upset him.
I understand that. AJ, I work around these guys, so I have friends that are like Dan that are. I ain't never getting promoted. I'm not gonna go up there and drink out of that coffee pot in that office. I'll be down here showing it's that it's military sergeant's probably the biggest person I can equate to folks like Dan, to where they like being amongst the work, they love being amongst the team, the staff. They like being a part of the mission, and they like kind of just being right here, to where they're very influencing. They're influencing those recruits and the young folks that are coming through. But they just don't want to make that bridge into what you would call leadership. But they're doing it every day in kind of what would be a drill sergeant, or that buck sergeant type role, to where you're still kind of out there fighting the fight and doing the things, and not wearing the white helmet. So
No white
Uh,
helmets for this guy.
he uh, he was back on a fire on the western side of the state, and he sent me a picture of the new E. An engine was called E. Like the engine that was that was burned was E78. They anything like an ambulance was called A72. An engine was called E78, and the engine that was burned over was E78, and it was gone. But he sent me a picture of the new E78 that he was the engine boss of on a new fire. He was fighting a fire in the western part of the state, and he sent me the picture. And I said, "Is that the new E78?" He goes, "Yes, it is." So it's kind of an exciting thing to see that he was back and the new E78 was back. And that sort of
Teams
inspired
back
me.
together.
Yeah. So that picture inspired me for the ending of the book, which you have to read the book. I think it's a very
Well,
lovely
yeah.
and touching ending. But you have to read the book to find it. I mean, it is a very good ending to the book that E78 was back with him. They came back together. And so they both came back.
Step us through. We got all right. So step me through. You're going home, and you're leaving. Your brother's with you. He's going to take care. So your brother plays a significant role. Walk me through that. Walk me through that journey home and back to your hometown.
My brother was, he's been an advocate for injured and
Patients.
sick people his whole adult life.
Mm-hmm.
Never meet a nicer person, you'll never meet a finer person. And he, when they said, we are going to release Dan on this date, which was months ahead of what everybody expected. Kelly lived in Western Washington, and he hung up the phone halfway through the call and got in his car and headed back. Because he wanted to be there to learn wound care, he wanted to learn whatever he had to do because he was part of the deal. If he could be there to help me, then they would go ahead and send me home. And he was, and was a huge, big part of everything. Fed me, helped me do bandage changes. And at that point, I was wearing garment, compression garments,
Yeah.
and
I got
uh, to keep if you don't wear those burn just take off. They get 3 or 4 inches high. It's crazy. But if you wear the compression bandages, it keeps it down. Kelly did all of that, and not unlike the hospital. Shame on me. I told him into it. You got to go. I'll deal with this. And he did. And we lost Kelly about a year ago to pneumonia, and we miss him every day.
Yeah,
Book is dedicated to
that's
him.
neat. Yeah.
We
And
dedicated the
he's
book.
right there. It's good that he was in your life, man, to have that to play that role and someone that's close to you and that you
Excuse me.
trust, right? Because you're otherwise, you may have ended up in a place with strangers.
Yeah, for 6.
Yeah,
Although I will tell you, the people in that hospital are amazing. The people in the burn ward are beyond amazing.
Hearing
And
allergies.
many of them have become incredible friends. Doctors, nurses, PT people. Um, and I've become a part of that community, or trying to get back into that community as a burn survivor and
yeah.
a mentor for other burn survivors.
That's what I mean. That's I'm glad you are, right? And that should come natural to you. But there's also that apprehension of being able to having to relive this, and I find that's common amongst public safety folks is we don't mind sharing the pain that we go through to help other folks collapse that, and so that they're not so they're not walking alone. And whether it's a setback from injury or knuckleheaded stuff, some stuff like I did, or what have you, it's that passion for helping still exists, and we still live with it, and we enjoy. So that's what I was going to ask you real quick because I want to hear. I got a couple questions for AJ. Um, is what are you doing with that now? Are you getting to speak? Are you doing any social or running your own podcast? Or what is kind of your life looking like now?
I got sick and found out last summer I have um, what they call small cell carcinoma, which is a lung cancer that is fatal at the end of the day. Um, so I had to pull away from some things when I began chemotherapy the first time. And one of the things I had to give up was fire, which about broke my heart. And I was unable to be as aggressively engaged with other burn survivors. Um, I've got a lot of friends that I made while we were all in the hospital at the same time. One of those being Kevin, who's he was 11 at that time and battling. Um, and during PT, when I would, they'd say do this, do that, and I'd do this and do that and bitch. And Kevin cried. He's 11 years old, and he was going through a lot more than I was. Um, so my time now is trying to get back into more mentoring burn survivors. I did what they call kids camp, which is burn survivor kids that are 13 and under. Did that in 23, had a ball. Did a river trip with adult burn survivors in 23. That was amazing. Um, and last year I was set up to do kids camp, and my oncologist said, no, we got to get now. We can't wait a week. So that's where I'm at. Got into remission. Remission ended. I got into remission in October. That ended in January, and I'm back on chemo again. Hoping for another.
We are. I think if there's anyone that is will be back on telling me the second chance story of how they beat cancer, it's going to be Dan Steffensen. So I'll just go ahead and you let me know whenever you want to have that conversation because we can we'll walk through that story and we'll document that because you're tough as nails. And I see that just being another part of your story. And I'll definitely be pulling for you. But what I wanted to know, the kind of where we are now, is you are burned, all the things, you're back home, and where does AJ come in, Dan? Where does this story with AJ pick up at? And AJ, whoever wants to tell it, um, how did this AJ kind of told me a little bit of it when we were talking the other day, but I want everybody else to kind of hear it. Who somebody take the lead here and let's talk about how AJ gets into Dan's life.
I'll let AJ.
Um, well, we met. I'm a professor at MSU at Montana State, and we met on a campaign that my students were doing to promote the stuff he was wearing that saved his life, personal protective equipment. And Dan was the star of the show because he stood up and said, please give us money so we can buy enough equipment so all firefighters can survive like I did. And so we got acquainted there. He said, could you write my book? Because he had seen a couple of books that I had written, and he said, could you write my book? And I said, well, I'm really good at 2,000 words, Dan. you know? And he said, well, I think you could write mine. I said, I've never written a nonfiction novel before. This was my first, and it took 2.5 years. It was not easy. It took a lot of interviewing, because I didn't know anything about fire. I didn't know anything about burns. I did know Montana pretty well, and it was a very emotional thing to do. I think on both Dan's and my part. And 2.5 years later, we got it out, and I think I will carry it on and keep trying to get it out there because the response has been that it's an important book to burn survivors and
Yeah.
firefighters and to Montana. So I think I will keep trying to get the book out there, keep telling Dan's story.
Um, this is my friend Logan. If you go back, Logan and I, she's from my area. She was a Mayday firefighter down and flew out. And um, I've had other officers. I don't think those are private conversations where that have been in shootings, and I've lost friends, all the things, right? So AJ, to put this in perspective, is what Dan experienced. Does not like that's an anomaly. He lived to talk. He walked through the fire and lived to tell the tales from that side of it. So there's this. That was like when I was reading about him before I reached out to you guys. Like, holy crap! This is the absolute. A story that is, growing up in the firehouse as a kid, Dan will be talked about forever.
Mm.
He will that this story will in our culture, in public safety culture. So getting this out and for other people to know, and I'm if you saw me looking aside as we were moving through, I had a couple of friends. I was like, "Hey, I'm live with this guy. You need to hear this. I'm live with Dan. This is someone that I want. This is an episode. I never push my episodes out to my friends. I'm like, if y'all want to listen to it, listen to it. But I'm like, hey, this is because it's such a story, Dan and AJ that. I read, like when I was a kid sitting around our firehouse, we would be talking about this story of Dan and how he did this, and this was his setback, and this was all the things, and it will absolutely, it'll be something that will be told for generations to come, and especially because I grew up kind of small townish as well. I know a lot of people. The town's grown, but still, that story is anchored in that small town forever.
Yes.
It truly is. Everybody knows everybody,
Yeah,
and as you know, sometimes that's not a good thing.
I
But
agree.
That's true.
mostly all a good thing. I did have to leave when I got sick, but I still have a lot of friends out there.
Yeah.
Hmm.
AJ, so your goal here is we want as many people as possible to read the book.
Right.
We want to make sure that we can honor this moment, and appreciate the um the resilience and this overcoming and the story that comes to life. Like I say, man, um I will I was just sitting here thinking about stories that was told when I come in. It's like, hey, just be mindful of this. And here's what you'll learn, AJ, on the fire. Sometimes in public safety is someone has to get hurt before it changes. As much as we all
Yes.
might sit around and be like, you know what, we need this, we need that. Everybody's like, yeah, the budget won't allow. Case in point,
Hmm.
we didn't have red light changers in my hometown. And a
Hmm.
couple of years ago, fire chief and one of the first officers is driving through, car comes out, is there an accident, whatever's. But the two firefighters perished in that accident. And immediately we get the red light cams where when the fire truck's coming, the sensor sets off and all the lights blinked red, so the fire truck. But it took an incident, so that's what the training side of this and the story that gets told is like that. So I can see me being that young firefighter. It's like, hey, just when you're out here in July, know that this happens. Know that this is some possibilities, and these are some things. This was the atmosphere that day. This was what was going on. This is how you pick. So we learn and we train off of these very, very significant moments sometimes. So we do that
Right.
in law enforcement as well, to where if there's a shooting, we'll debrief that. Is what can we change if it's a tactics issue, if it's something along those lines. How can we get faster, smoother, and smarter off of what should be, an incident that's like, oh, we should never talk about this again. But we use them to fuel our education.
And
And
and in the book we have what did we do wrong, and at the end of the book, and everybody everybody has something. Everybody we interviewed said, boy, we should have done this. Everybody felt guilty about something. Even Dan was saying, I effed up. I effed up. Even though everybody said no, you didn't. But even the people who trained him thought that maybe they hadn't trained him well enough. And we talk so much about training in this book, and
Yeah.
and there's issues about the weather. The National Weather Service and how they report weather, and there's issues about the radio frequency and how many channels that they have to deal with. I tried to make characters out of the radio frequency and the weather service and the storm and storm warnings, and all of his colleagues say, from now on, we're never going to not stop for a weather check. We're never going to not stop to make sure everybody's communicating on the same on the same radio frequency. All these procedures that are set in concrete and protocol by the firefighters, they hadn't even set up yet. I mean, they were still setting up to get everything in line. Communication set up, spot weather check set up. They hadn't even been there 10 minutes to get all that done. So the IC, the incident commander, was following the book, but it all happened so fast before that wall of fire came in and burned Dan. So the accident report said that it was just one of those things. It's not that they hadn't been following protocol. It just all happened so fast that none of the things they normally get in place, it happened too fast before they had anything in place. So we do report on all of that stuff at the end of the book, saying, here's everything that went wrong, that normally they take care of. And, they follow all of these procedures in a fire.
Yeah.
It just didn't happen this time. And Dan suffered from it because he is a senior firefighter who follows all the rules, and still fights fire. Rule number 10, fires aggressively, taking all safety first. And that's their rule number 10. And they try to do that, but it doesn't always happen.
There are 10 of those rules, Jeff, and I've broken all 10 more than once.
Yeah.
That's how you
And
put fire.
we talk about all of that in the book.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
No,
I will tell you,
I know exactly what you're saying there.
AJ, everyone told me you have to write a book about this. And I couldn't have agreed more, but I found very quickly I have no talent in that regard. Meeting AJ godsend. I will not kid you, it was not an unpainful experience.
It was not fun. Yeah.
And we both had a different vision for the book, but I think we came to the middle, mostly towards AJ's middle. And
Only
I couldn't be,
because he wanted it to be all about fire, and I thought it was a real human story. And so but I think
I can hear both you. I can hear Dad like, what do you mean? This is not, no, we're not going to talk about my feelings and emotions. We're putting out a fire. I can hear this conversation unfolding.
and Dan does
Yes.
not talk about his feelings, as you can imagine. So,
Yeah.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
That was basically, yeah. As Dan
Yeah,
said, it was
let's don't talk about it. It's been fun in the hospital. Let's get back to the fire scene, man. Turn the lights and sirens on. There's a helicopter above. Everybody gets to fight fire with a helicopter over top of them. Got to tell that part. I can I definitely understand the adventure side.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Dan,
fire in the book. Yeah. I'm sorry.
that
Go
is
ahead.
not the first engine sadly. So maybe I'm a little more aggressive than I should be.
You've burned a couple engines up before, have you? Yeah, it's I think if you're in the fire service long enough, you're going to have those stories, especially doing what you all do in those settings to where it's like, oops, or things change too quickly and you can't mitigate the risk as fast, and you just have to cut your losses and move on. So yeah, what does your
But I will say
what do
that in
you?
a couple of the reviewers did say, if you liked Young Men in Fire, which is Norman McLean's book, then you will like this book. And when Dan read that review, he went, "Oh well, that's not too bad." I went, "Right." So, and then another friend of mine said, every time I see a fire engine pass by now, I have a complete different appreciation for what firefighters go through. So there is fire in this book. It's not the best fire book, but it is a fire book. But it really is a human story about what Dan went through, what the people at Red Lodge went through, what his family went through, what the community went through. So it's a human book. I mean, people have told me that they have to put it down to cry, and then before they can pick it back up again. So, yeah,
I totally understand that too. I can only imagine that. What do you two, and I'd love to hear from both of you on this because you might have different opinions, but what is the goal of the book? what is the goal, and what would what are we hoping that folks can walk away or take away? Dan and AJ, what, like, this is a man. I'm kind of having my own popcorn moment here, right? Where I'm just super excited that I get kind of this firsthand account, and I'm excited to go and read the book. But like, when you look at what you went through, Dan, and your connection with AJ, and your strong, all the things that we went through, and we're like, we're gonna put this on paper. Um, and we put it on paper for purpose. And what does that look like?
I've learned a great deal of things that I did not know,
Mm,
um, particularly the times that I was in the coma. Uh, no one told me that I had died 3 times.
yeah,
Uh, why they didn't share that with me, I'll never know, but they didn't. But the book, I had to write this book not for me, uh, not for the fire service, but for the people out of the fire service, the people in my town that embraced me, uh, and the people at the hospital. They're just they're godsends and amazing people, and they put up with me mostly, and they've all become, like I said, incredibly good friends. And that's all you can ask for from an accident like this, is to not walk away mad, not walk away angry. Um, Embrace those that helped you, and make them part of your family. And they are part of my family, good and bad.
yeah. AJ, anything to add to that?
Um, well, I think in the beginning it was, I was with Dan. The goal was to thank all the people who saved him, and I think we've done that. I think in the beginning we say, these were good people who stepped up to greatness, and there's so many of them who do it every day, and they are hardly ever recognized. And we tried to show people, look at these people who do this job, do this work, and the outcome is people do come back to life. The burn survivors have a saying: between the past and the future is acceptance. And it took Dan a long time to accept his new world, but he did, because of these people. And I hope that we made that clear and showed how people do get on with their lives. I'm hoping that this inspires people to do that. And if we've accomplished that, and made all of these people feel recognized, then I'm hoping that I think we did a good job. I felt, once I got into it, I felt the need to capture the love and put it on the
Yeah,
page. And that was my goal, to capture the love. It wasn't easy. I felt a lot of stress throughout the process. I felt like I had to really raise my skills to do it, but that was what I hoped to do, and get that on the page.
that's right. That will be a separate episode for us, AJ, because I'd love to learn about you coming out of your comfort zone and stepping into an area that is totally,
Mhm.
totally not your wheelhouse, and
Right.
figuring out how to make it work. And that's where our growth comes from. Like, I think we mentioned
Hmm.
that earlier. Um, I,
Hmm. Right.
AJ really stepped the game on this book, big time.
Well, thank you, Dan.
you know, AJ, for as we wrap up here, you guys are welcome. If we miss something, and you're, let me know. But if we ever want to come back and talk about a particular part or whatever, let's definitely do that. But what I wanted to tell you, AJ, is I've been in this situation before, to where it's happened to me as a kid. It happened to me as a teenager. It happened to me as an adult in my public. And my kid was just a child. But there's times when I have been in bad situations, and I hear this. I know that help's on the way when I hear that faint sound of those sirens. And
Hmm.
and when you were telling me, both of you were explaining your why behind the book, that's what I was thinking about. And that's what I see the book as. It's that help that's on the way for that person who's in that bad situation. I've been in a lot of them, and I always remembered, like, I might be in a fight on the side of the road, or I might be in a bad thing. But when I heard that, um,
Hmm.
faint, that just that very distant, I'm like, all right, I got about 2 minutes, right? I got about three. I knew that help was close by, and
Hmm.
that's the hope that I see that this your book is leaving, is that hope is out there, and hope, and you can get through this, and you can survive, and it's all, life might change, but it will continue on, and help is not too far away. And through that testimony that you're able to provide, and the legacy that you're able to live. And like I said, you lived through something that a lot of people don't get to talk about. We would talk about in a different pretense, in a different context, but you're that's what I see that book as a public safety responder, and someone who lived that life. Is I know that the hope that that book is going to provide, and I kind of equated in my head is that hearing those faint sirens that are coming to help me when I'm in the worst possible place I could possibly be at the time, thinking, I really could use some help right now. And you hear it, and it's close, and then it gives you, and all of a sudden you're like, hope. And it's like me opening your book, and I'm seeing these, and following along with that, and seeing your progress. I think when you look at what both of you have accomplished, is you're absolutely two of the biggest hope dealers, and the burn and the burn and resilience, folks that have experienced that. I think you two are absolutely two of the biggest hope dealers that are impacting and will impact those folks. So
Well,
And that couldn't be more.
I only put on
They
paper what other people accomplished. So
yeah,
yeah.
they we changed some things up at the department right before I left. One of those was, in certain instances, you can respond with lights but no siren, or no lights or siren. And I was happy to do that till I got 3 blocks away, and then I fired up the siren for exactly the reason that people got to know you're coming.
yep, yeah, helps. I remember the first time I heard, I had one of my relatives that got hurt, and we'd like, call the rescue squad. Back then we had to call a 10-digit number, and you just like, in rescue, it was like what you're talking about, where you may have one. And I remember like just going, it'll be okay, and talking to them. And then I heard that faint sound. I'm like, oh, that's close. Man, we got help's close. The help's close. And it started then as a little kid, and it carried through later in life. And that when you were talking, I was like, oh, this totally reminds me of that moment, and some of those moments I was able to live through. Dan, I'm going to be pulling for you, and I'm going to share this story. I'm absolutely um, grateful that you came on. I'm going to do my due diligence to share it with as many people as I possibly can that I know, and through my public safety friends and connections. And then me and a former public safety director in the town that I grew up in, every other Thursday. So not this Thursday, but Thursday after, we do a live show as well, where we just talk about current events or whatever. So anytime you'd like to guest with us, to just sit in the third seat to just talk about whatever. Like we covered the L.A. fires, and we covered the New Orleans incident, and we debrief some incidents if there's something going on from it. We give our opinion on, like, this is a little short over here, or this looks good. So you're welcome to join us anytime that you would like. Just let me know. But I can't
I,
thank both of you enough. Absolutely, to be with us tonight live, unscripted, to share this story and your accounts, and for to just give me the opportunity to get to know you through this through our live setting tonight. So thank you both for being with us.
It's
thanks
been
for having
great.
us.
Yeah, thank you so much for
Um,
having us. I really appreciate it. And by the way,
AJ, I dropped the
the book is
links.
also in Kindle and Audible in case anybody prefers
Yep.
that. So
So I
yeah.
dropped the links. The
Oh,
name of the
good.
book is, yep, I dropped the links in our stream, but tell us the name of the book.
It's called Burned Over: The Survival of Dan Steffensen, Montana firefighter Dan Steffensen.
All right, and we're going to backlink that in all of our show notes so folks will make it easy for you to find. And then if you're watching, it was on the stream as well. But I'll make sure that we get those links in there so to make it easy for people to find it. But appreciate you guys. Thank y'all for being with us tonight.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so
It's been
much, Joe.
great. Thank you.